Four Purusharthas, four goals of human life: Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. Now, as you saw, I had kept Moksha in brackets separately for a discussion. We will go into that now. This discussion is going to be a much more serious affair than the morning discussion. We are going to some very profound deliberations now. Let me start where I left off with that structure. There is a very well-known text on Advaita Vedanta called Vicharsagara, from which I have taken this, what I am going to tell you now. It's the understanding of our ancient Vedanta texts, Upanishads also, but very systematically it has been set out. I am going to tell you something based on what I said in the morning. I am going to develop that little further. Now, I am abandoning the terminology of pleasure, engagement, feeling. I am abandoning that. I am going to use only this Kama, Artha, Dharma and Moksha. Now, those who are interested only in Artha and Kama, I want pleasure in life, want to have a good time in life, and I want to be rich and powerful and successful. Lots of people, especially in modern world, especially if you go to the campuses, I've been there, IIMs, IITs, yes, this is the goal, what's wrong with it? That's the idea they have got. Many people, not all, but many do have that. Now, in this group, those who want this only, there is a term used in our Shastras, and it's a bit derogatory. The term used is Pamara. Pamara. What does Pamara mean? Pamara means literally an uncultured person living at an instinctive level of life. What instinctive desires swell up from within, from my subconscious mind. I just want that, nothing more. That's all. That's all that there is in life. Wealth and power, Artha and Kama. And those who chase this only. No question of dharma, morality, decency, none of that. And just for the sake of not being caught by the police or being ashamed by members of society, I may have a mask of decency in front, just enough to get by. But that's not my purpose, that's not my goal in life. I am not seeking morality or anything higher. I just want to be rich and powerful and successful and enjoy life. So this kind of attitude is called Pamara. Luckily, this is not the majority in society. There is another group, they also want this, Artha and Kama, but within the limits, within the bounds of decency, morality, law. So that group which takes Dharma as the basis, and of course they want Artha and Kama also. That group, a term is used, Vishayi. Normally a word Vishayi means a worldly person, but not in a bad sense. Not in a bad sense. Most people do want success in life, wealth, and they do want pleasure in life. There is nothing wrong with that, as long as it is on the basis of morality and decency. Majority of people in society are in this group, and that's really good, because otherwise the society cannot last. A society where majority of Pamara cannot actually last. It will break down. Question may come, is there anybody who wants just Kama or just Artha, just chasing pleasure? Not many people are there, but there may be. Say a drug addict or an alcoholic who just wants that pleasure, nothing else. Not even money and success, willing to give up all money and become a financial ruin in some Western countries. That's why you all must have seen. Australia, an Indian gentleman who settled there, who was taking me around Melbourne, I think, no, Sydney. I say people are generally prosperous. Wherever you see standard of living in the world, in the top 10 countries, you will always find Australia and New Zealand. You will find Denmark and Norway, some Scandinavian countries, never USA. This is much lower. And India, of course, way down. Now, I said people are generally happy here, so they have nobody has house homeless. And that Indian gentleman told me, Swamiji, nobody is poor here. They are either rich or very rich. Only some you will find in the streets, a very poor condition. What happened? They are actually either drug addicts or something. They had money and house and everything, but everything is ruined. Only pleasure. So that's a small group. Pleasure and money, big group. But luckily majority is within the norms of dharma, they want pleasure and success. Now, those who want, they do not want this artha and kama. Somehow they are evolved to the point where it is not satisfactory. It is not satisfactory anymore. They go beyond that. You see, if you think about it, how much happiness can it give us? If you just think about it, there is a Buddhist meditation, very interesting meditation, very depressing also. We have to think about how much you ate today at lunchtime. Imagine the rice and the dal and the sabji and all the items in front of you. Just imagine with your eyes closed. Now add to that what you ate for breakfast. Add to that what you had for breakfast and lunch and dinner yesterday. It will grow. Imagine how much I have eaten in the last 30 days. In front, you cannot bring it in the room, you have to take it to the lawn outside. Imagine how much I have eaten this year. How much mountain of rice, how much swimming pool full of sambar, and mountain of sabji I have eaten. Imagine how much I have eaten from my childhood, from my birth till today. Rivers and oceans full of milk and sambar and so on. Mountains and mountains of rice. All this one body at this point. So this meditation, sit and think. 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. At this point, all those resources culminate here. Now you think, after all of that, what have I got? Forget what I have given to the world. It is more depressing. What have I got? How much happiness? How much satisfaction? How much permanent gain have I got from all this? This whole tremendous exercise of feeding my own body. That's only food. Let alone all other resources. Housing and education and electric power. One aeroplane trip from one place to another. Imagine the fuel expenses. So this huge amount of resources which I have consumed till this point in my life, how much permanent satisfaction have I got from it till now? Answer is bound to be quite depressing for everybody. For the poorest man and for Bill Gates also. So artha and kama, just by itself, not very satisfactory at all. Nobody till today has got satisfaction. Just seeing that so many rich people donate something for schools, colleges, hospitals and so on and so forth. One boy, can you imagine? He donated $10 million. Young man, in his 20s. Entire money in America. He had multiple companies of his own. There are many such people. He sold his companies to his partner, donated all the money, made a trust. He told me, he became a monk. He told me that, oh, whatever money I earned, I have made a trust, I have hired 2 people to give it away. He said, hired 2 people to give away your money? How much money do you have? Or how much did you have? $10 million from me. That much I donated, 2 different causes. Not required. That person has seen it all, does not want it. So now there is a kind of person who turns away from it into something else. And this spiritual quest, this is also a quest for happiness. This is a quest for happiness, that's also a quest for happiness. This we saw in the morning. Now there is something more ultimate, more permanent. They turn towards that. the search for moksha, the search for God, the search for self-realization. And that search, those who take up, they give up this artha and kama. These people are called sadhaka. In that Vichar Sadhana text we find in our Shastras. Such people are called sadhaka. What do they want? They want moksha on the basis of dharma. They don't become adharmic. Now here I want to make a slight technical clarification, because I know there are some who do regular study of the Shastras, and they might point out there is a technical mistake you are making here. Traditionally in the Upanishads you will see there is a clear division here. Dharma, artha, kama is called pravritti marga. Search for moksha is called nivritti marga. Why they do that? Why do they leave out? That's all. Why do they leave out dharma when you search for moksha? There is a reason for that. The reason is dharma has so many meanings. One meaning of dharma is trying to get enough punyam to go to swarga after death, post-mortem enjoyment. In this life, you enjoy artha and kama. After death, you go to swarga and enjoy again in another way. So, post-mortem enjoyment, that's also a search for enjoyment. That's also another kind of search for enjoyment, more subtle enjoyment. That is why those who are spiritual seekers, they do not seek for that type of dharma. That's a very technical word which made performing certain yajnas found in the karma kanda, and that person is going to go to swarga. That was the belief. Now those who want to go for, those who want spiritual life, God realization, they have to give up this artha and kama in this life, relative enjoyments, and also the post-mortem enjoyment, swarga. So that is why sadhaka is somebody, technically speaking, to be correct, very precise, this thing is not correct. Sadhaka is somebody who wants only moksha. Vishayi is one who wants artha and kama on the basis of dharma. And pamara is one who chases only artha and kama, or only kama. So a sadhaka, one becomes a sadhaka. From Vishayi, one becomes a sadhaka. Why I have added dharma is something I have done, because to our modern ear it sounds very odd, giving up dharma. So what happens here is, just like that boy I mentioned, he gave up sakama dharma, but he held on to nishkama dharma. Sakama dharma means I am doing this for some benefit of me. It's a good thing, I am doing good things, but I want some benefit. Nishkama dharma means what I am going to do now is for the benefit of others. Is for the benefit of others. So that boy, he had earned so much money, now he is giving away that money, and that money which is giving away is for the benefit of others. That's also dharma, and that's nishkama dharma. And what is he doing now? He is searching for spiritual knowledge. He is searching for spiritual happiness. What is that spiritual happiness? How can we get it? Why should we search for it? That is the topic I have brought today. So that dharma, nishkama dharma and sakama dharma are different. I'll give you another example of sakama dharma. Just recently one gentleman came to Belur Math, our headquarters, and very well known gentleman, Indian, but very famous internationally, I am not naming him. He offered to give more than 1,000 crore rupees to set up a big project to fund for science education in Calcutta. I'll give land and more than 1,000 crores of funding and everything. Only one condition he imposed: it should be in my name. So we do not do that. Always our approach, our work is the worship of God. So Maharaj there refused. He said we cannot do that. Name it after Vivekananda or Ramakrishna, something else, some divine name you give, not personally. But he was unwilling to compromise on that. Now you see the psychology involved there. He wants to do something good and great. That's important. But additionally, my name should be associated with it. That's also dharma. That's also dharma. I give donation, one plaque should be put there in my name. Nothing bad in it, but that is not spirituality. That is still one step away from spirituality. So my name should be associated, or you want welfare science project. Which one do you want? Both. I cannot give up my name there. That becomes Sakama Dharma. It is Dharma, no doubt. Sakama Dharma. Nishkama Dharma, only the benefit of others. I should be nowhere in the picture. Actually, I should not be. That person will feel uneasy if his or her name is mentioned and put in the spotlight. On the basis of that is a search for spiritual knowledge. What is this search for spiritual knowledge? What is this quest? In one of our ancient texts, Sankhya Karika, which is an introductory text to Sankhya philosophy, maybe the most ancient philosophy of mankind. Yesterday we saw that yoga film. The whole of yoga is based on Sankhya philosophy actually. Even yoga philosophy has its roots in Sankhya philosophy of Kapila. Now the Sankhya Karika, written some 1600, 1700 years ago, it starts with a classic Karika or verse. The first line sets out this problem of human life and the search for spirituality. It says, Dukkhatraya vihata tad apaghat jigyasa tad apaghatate hetu. Says we have three types of miseries. Traditional way of expressing Adhyatmika, Adidaivika, Adibhautika. Physical problems of this world, bodily and mental problems which are Adhyatmika inside our own personality. The problems from nature, tsunami and flood and heat and cold and all this, and of course problems from other living beings. So all types of problems, suffering in this world. Hit by this suffering, by this kind of suffering, the human being has a question in the mind. How to overcome suffering? An objection comes in the second line. Drishte sa partha che. Yes, there is a quest to overcome suffering, but there are so many worldly means of overcoming suffering. Why go for spiritual means? Drishta upaya. Drishta upaya means what you can see with your eyes. In the world there are so many ways of overcoming suffering. Why go for spiritual solution? Then next it says why we should go for spiritual solution. Vachaspati Mishra, the great scholar, 10th century scholar, he has written an extensive and beautiful commentary on Sankhya Karika, especially on this first verse, Sankhya Tattva Kaumudi. And there he sets out in such great detail what are the worldly methods of overcoming suffering. He says, you have got physical suffering, go to the medicine man, go to the doctor, and he has got so many methods of curing your suffering. Whatever suffering you have got, especially modern medicine. There was a conference where a doctor was presenting how lifespans have increased in India, and his conclusion was interesting. He said we can live longer, no doubt now. We cannot live well. We can be living longer, but that longer life is beset with so many troubles. Physical suffering you can overcome with medicine, modern medicine. Mental suffering, he gives a list of enjoyments which you can have. Nowadays many more avenues are there. You're feeling bored, depressed, whatnot. You have a TV and internet and cinema and so many activities. The whole world is ready to entertain you so that you don't get bored. You have to only pay a little. That's there. So physical suffering can be taken care of. Natural calamities, disaster management, such a great amount of work is being done now to save you from natural calamity. So why do you need spiritual solution? Why not the existing, manifested, the concrete solutions which the world offers? And this 1600 years ago, Sankhya Karika, in just a quarter of a shloka, gives the devastating answer why none of these worldly solutions are of any use ultimately. Why? It says, Ekanta Atyanta Abhava. Ekanta Atyanta Abhava. What does he mean? First of all, Atyanta Abhava. There is no permanent solution to suffering. Cure your illness, again some other illness will come. Since rheumatoid arthritis, if you chase it from the foot, it will go to the elbows. If you chase from elbow, it will go to the neck. Suffering comes in different forms. You cannot avoid it. Cure one, another type will come. So, atyanta bhava. Enjoy life, eat lot of good food, you're satisfied. Next day in the morning again, stomach will make guru sound. I want my express breakfast now. So, there is no permanent solution into any kind of human suffering. It will come back in different forms. And again, the other reason given is ekanta bhava. All of us have unfortunately experienced that even the best hospital, best doctor, best treatment in the world, there is no guarantee that it will cure you. There is no guarantee. Sick person with hardly any kind of treatment recovers. Same sickness, another person, best hospital in the world, best doctor, dies. No guarantees there that any of these worldly means will actually solve your problem. So there is no guarantee, no permanence. Since there is no permanence and no guarantee, these worldly means are not enough. And this is Sankhya Karika, 1600 years ago. A Chinese scholar had come to Vellore Mutt last year, and I learned from him 1600 years ago. It's written in India. 1500 years, within 100 years of that book was translated into Chinese. This is a Chinese version, still existing. Imagine today we are talking about scholars and papers and international conferences and knowledge being exchanged on internet. Those days, across the Himalayan barrier, within 100 years book is available in China. Until today that is there. It's about older 70 verses in Chinese. Now that Chinese scholar is making a more modern translation into Chinese. Sankhya Karika. It sets out the fundamental basis for spiritual quest, for the quest for spiritual happiness, because none of these solutions which give worldly happiness has ever till today satisfied anybody. And we can see by our own experience, when you look back to that Buddhist exercise, you are not satisfied. Nobody can say that I have got enough in this life. At this moment, no, not enough. So the quest for spirituality starts. Is there any spiritual solution? Is it possible to get permanent happiness, permanent end to sorrow, guaranteed end to sorrow? The answer from spiritual tradition says yes, it is possible. There is a possibility. That is the promise not only of Indian spirituality but of every religion. Every religion in the world promises that in different language, in different mythology, different philosophy, but the answer is that. There is a verse, mantra from the Upanishads, which Swami Vivekananda was fond of repeating in America when he went for giving lectures on Hinduism. And we all know this. Shrinvantu Vishve Amritasya Putraha Aye Namani Divyani Tastu Vedaham Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasas Parastar Tameva Viditva Ati Mrityumeti Nanya Pantha Vidyate Ayana. What does it say? Somebody in the ancient past of India, no name. Most of these ancient scriptures you will not find the name. Guru's name may be there. Their own name they will not give. Scholar pointed out in our university, Maharaj, just the opposite now. Whether I have anything to say or not, my name should be there first. And somebody said, one way of rooting out all nonsense which is published is, if you make a rule, your name will not be published. Then you find 80 to 90% of authors will drop out. Only genuine thing will be remaining. So that was the tradition. Unfortunately, the consequences, we don't have historical data about this. Who said it? But some rishi somewhere said this. Listen, ye children of immortal bliss. We think the greatest fact that we know about ourselves, most depressing fact, is we will die. Everyone we know has died. Old people, others are dying, and one day surely I will die, we will all die. To us, this rishi is saying, Amritasya Putra, you are children of immortal bliss. Not mortal, immortal. And he is saying, Aye Dhamani Vidyani Tastu. If there are gods in the heavens, you also listen, because what I am going to say you don't know. The greatest spiritual secret. What is that? Vedaham Purusham Mahantam. There is an infinite being which I have realized. What is that infinite being like? Supposing such a thing is there. He says Aditya Varnam, shining like the sun, not with a material light, but with the light of consciousness. Blazing forth with the light of consciousness, Aditya Varnam, shining like the sun. You are reminded of Bhagavad Gita, 11th chapter, when Vishwarupa Darshana, Arjuna got it and describes in stirring poetry, Yadi Devi Sahasresha, in the sky, 1,000 suns were to rise together. That is the glory of God realization which you get. It is said that Oppenheimer, when the first atomic bomb was exploded, since he quoted this. That's a material light, but here it refers to a light of consciousness. Aditya Varnam. And what else? Tamasa Parastat, beyond the darkness. Beyond darkness. What darkness? The darkness of death, the darkness of human limitation, the darkness of sorrow and misery. Beyond that, there is an existence. There is something. And I have realized that. Alright, you have realized it. Supposing there is such a thing, what good is it? What does it give me? Tameva viditva ati mrityumeti. Realizing that one goes beyond death. One goes beyond death. One goes beyond suffering. One attains to a happiness which is undecaying. An undecaying happiness one attains. Tameva viditva ati mrityumeti. One transcends death. What about all these worldly ways? Medicine, technology, internet, science, politics, capitalism or socialism or the stock market. What about all this? Nanya pantha vidyate ayanaya. None of these things, whether in economics or in science or in medicine, none of them will give this permanent solution to suffering. All of them are good at their own level. They have their effects. But this permanent solution to the human quest for happiness is only possible through this way, to realizing that spiritual reality. This is the promise of all religion. I think this is the best introduction to religion. That there is some reality which transcends our relative existence, and we can realize it. We can experience it and be one with it in this life. Now, I want to draw your attention to something strange in this mantra. Have you noticed the language? Tameva viditva ati mrityumeti. By realizing that spiritual reality, I go beyond death, or you will go beyond death. That spiritual reality is immortal, beyond death. By realizing that, you go beyond death. Now that's a bit strange, don't you think? By knowing something, you don't become that thing. I know this glass of water. Do I become this glass of water? Thank God I don't. If you know something and you become that, it will be horrible. I know it, but I don't become a glass of water. You know a tree, you don't become a tree. You know a molecule, you don't become a molecule. But by knowing that spiritual reality, how do you become that spiritual reality? Now there is only one possibility. By knowing something we become that, there is only one case where it is possible. What is that? Yes, absolutely. Correct. When you are already that, imagine the son of a king, a prince, somehow lost in the forest, brought up by a woodcutter. Many years later, the minister searching for that, a famous old story. He comes to the forest and finds that child who is grown up and says that you are not the son of a poor woodcutter, you are the prince of this entire kingdom. And when the child realizes this, he becomes the prince. How did the son of a woodcutter become a prince? Because actually he was the prince. He did not know it. Swami Vivekananda tells the story of the lioness who gave birth and died, and the little lion cub was brought up with the sheep. And from early infancy, he thought it was sheep, and bleated like a sheep, and ate grass like a sheep, until another lion who was stalking the sheep to catch one of the sheep, saw this big lion walking in the middle of the sheep and eating grass. So this other lion stopped them and caught hold of that lion who was with the sheep and dragged that fellow to the edge of a pool and said, "See, you are a lion." And then lion was scared. "No, no, no, sir, I am a sheep. Let go of me. I'm scared. You're scaring me." He said, "No, you are a lion like me. Look at the pool. The way I look, you also look like that. The way I look, you also look like that. And you are a lion. I am roaring. Don't bleat. You roar also." And when that lion roared and realized that I am a lion, how did the sheep become a lion? It's already a lion, did not know it. And this is an interesting thing. In our present case, what Vedanta tells us is that already we are that spiritual reality. We just don't know it. We just don't feel it. We just don't realize it. We think we are limited creatures of flesh and blood. We are born and we shall die. That's who we are. Recently, in Calcutta, in Advaita Ashram, I was asked to give a talk on, in Bengali, it is Ami Ke, who am I? So I started the talk like this. Who am I? Very easy. Take out your Aadhaar card, show it. That's who I am. Who am I? My name and my background, everything is there. My father's name, what do I do now, everything is there. That is the sheep identity. The lion identity is hidden. That I am Satchidananda, this is the promise of religion, we don't know it yet. We just, maybe either we have never heard it, or we at least we have, even if we have heard it, we have read it. In Karnataka you have all heard it. There is a place of Shankara, of Madhva, of Ramanuja also. There is Udupi and Melkoti and Sringeri. All the great philosophies and philosophers have lived and worked here. And Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, Advaita, all are in full flower here. So we know this idea that our true inner reality is something spiritual, not this physical form of flesh and blood. This is a saying which I like very much. Where it says, we think we are human beings in search of spiritual experience. But the truth is, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are spiritual beings. We are having a human experience. We have forgotten that. In the context of happiness, what does it mean? It means something interesting. And that's where I was leading up to now, all this while. It means that happiness which we are searching for in the world outside is within us, is our own true self. There is a story. Sri Ramakrishna also tells the story. A dog had a little piece of a dry bone, and it would chew on the bone. And while chewing on that dry bone, its inner lip would get cut, and little blood would flow. And the dog would taste its own blood and say, "What a tasty bone!" And after some time, when satisfied, it would bury the bone like dogs usually do, cover it nicely, and go about its business. Again it would come out, take out that bone and chew it and taste its own blood, which it did not know its own blood. What a tasty bone. We may laugh at the poor dog, but our condition is exactly the same. The world is the bone which we are chewing. And the pleasure which we are trying to get in drops is not our blood. It is our own true self. Our Ananda Swarupa, which is reflected imperfectly in our minds. What happens is this. You see, we are that infinite ocean of bliss within. A bit of that gets reflected. Shankaracharya says in Taittiriya Upanishad Bhashyam, you are an infinite ocean of bliss. A drop of that, drops of that are the joys which you find in this world. Even the greatest pleasure and happiness and satisfaction in this world is a drop of the ocean of joy and peace and happiness, which not only you have, you are that. You are that. We are that. We have absolutely no idea. Even if we have an idea after listening to lectures, we have no way of reaching it. We have no way of accessing it. We are like that son of a multi-millionaire. Grandfather has left me crores of rupees. I know that in the will. So I am Karodpati. But what is this Karodpati doing? He is begging in the streets. Why? Because the place where the grandfather has left him, I don't have the bank account, I don't know which bank it is in, where are the passbooks, I don't know all that. I know I am a crorepati, but I cannot access that wealth. So I have to beg. Similarly, even after listening to Vedanta and hearing that even if you believe I am the ocean of bliss is within, but we don't have access to that. We still go on begging from the world, little bit of happiness here and there. So that is our condition. This Sufi gentleman, Sufi sadhaka whom I met in Lisbon this time, I think you saw the picture yesterday.
Yes.
So many beautiful things you are saying, sharing the sayings of sharing the sayings of Rumi. And it seems Rumi says in one place that you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the ocean in a drop. Very beautiful poetic way of saying exactly the same thing. Again he says that when I searched for Allah, God, I found myself. When I searched for myself, who am I? I found Allah, God. So the same idea that some infinite existence is there within us, that we have to find out. And how do we find that out? That is the quest for spiritual happiness. What this mantra says, Vedaham Purusham Mahantam. I'll just explain briefly the psychology behind this. How is it that this worldly happiness which we experience is a drop of that spiritual happiness? And then how do we get it? Very briefly I'll go through that. And then if there are any questions, we will take that afterwards. Now, what they are saying is, okay, let me draw it there. That will be easier to follow. What Vedanta says, this I am saying on the basis of Taittiriya Upanishad, is that you are the Atman. Like the sun, radiant like the sun. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at drawing. Sometimes I draw this in the training center in Belur Math, like this, and they will ask, brahmachari is sometimes naughty, so they will ask, Maharaj, what are you drawing, centipede or what is this? So this is the Atman. And this is Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. This Ananda Swarupa. And this is our mind. And this is the body. What they say is that when you enjoy something, say a nice cup of coffee, you're enjoying a nice cup of coffee, and you get the happiness. What happens is, you get the happiness. Of course, happiness is not in the coffee, not in the body also. Happiness is in the mind. So you are happy. This is your mind, and in mind you feel a kind of satisfaction when you sip that cup of coffee. This cup of coffee is representative of the world. Anything in the world. Now, what Vedanta says is, correct, there is happiness in the mind. But there is something more to this. What happens is, when you have a desire for a cup of coffee, a wave rises in the mind and obscures the natural happiness of the mind. You say the happiness is your own nature, it is continuously reflected in the mind. Just like my face will be reflected in a mirror, in the same way, your own Ananda Swarupa is reflected in the mind. Just like that dog chewing the bone, getting the happiness within from the taste of the blood. It is our own happiness reflected in the mind. When you have a desire, I want a cup of coffee, a desire comes in the mind. Then this happiness is obscured. When I get that cup of coffee and I drink it and I enjoy it, that desire is satisfied and this wave of desire dies down and we catch a glimpse of our own happiness. I think happiness has dried up here. We catch a glimpse of our own happiness within. So it is our own desire which is obscuring the reflection of happiness which is our own Swarupa. You are Ananda Swarupa. That is what shines in your mind, obscured by the waves of desire. When you satisfy a desire, those waves calm down temporarily and we get a glimpse of that inner happiness. That is the only happiness which we have. Again, unfortunately, the waves of desire arise. May not be for the cup of coffee, maybe for something else. And again it gets obscured. Now what is the way to get happiness? There are, follow me carefully, there are 3 ways to get this happiness. One way is, you can say that, well Swamiji, just as the dog, it is true that the dog's own blood it was tasting and getting the taste. But the bone is necessary. If the bone doesn't cut the lip, maybe the bone doesn't give the taste, its own blood is giving the taste, but the bone must cut the lip, otherwise how will it taste its own blood? In the same way, maybe it is my inner happiness, but unless I satisfy the desire for this cup of coffee, I will not get that happiness back. So this world is necessary. I must satisfy desire, then only I will get happiness. Desires are there, they are obscuring my inner happiness. I must remove those desires by satisfying them, then only I will get happiness. That is one answer. That is what we were looking at so far, dharmartha kama. Getting things in the world, achieving things in the world, going up in life, satisfying desires one after another, and getting happiness. Now Vedanta tells you that happiness is your own happiness. That's one path. That path is called, Sri Ramakrishna also uses this term, Vishaya Ananda. Vishaya Ananda. The Ananda which you get with the help of Vishaya. But if you think about it intelligently, there is another way. Another way of getting the same happiness. You see, if you say that the problem is not with the happiness, problem is with the desire which comes and obscures the happiness. Now, there may be another way. Taittiriya Upanishad says, an intelligent, more intelligent way will be, if at all the happiness is within, and the restlessness of my mind is obscuring my happiness, then what is the straightforward way of handling it? Exactly. You reduce the restlessness of the mind. Calm down the mind. Give up the desire. After all, what you want is not the cup of coffee. What you want is the satisfaction. What I want is happiness. These objects, they are only means to my happiness. If I really want happiness only, that's what I want, a more intelligent approach would be, if this is correct, if really my happiness does not depend on those things, really my happiness is within, the same happiness I will get if I don't desire it, if I look within, then let me try that. That is the second approach, a spiritual approach, where you give up chasing after this and that in the world and look for inner satisfaction. And that, Sri Ramakrishna uses the evocative word, where you don't go for worldly methods of satisfying desires, rather you concentrate on a spiritual approach. He calls it Bhajan Ananda. Bhajan Ananda. The joy of spiritual practice. The joy of spiritual practice. What is that joy? Where you give up chasing after external things, Artha and Kama, and you focus on God. This inner reality, it is not only your own self, it is also God. Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, in Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter, there is a very interesting portion where Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, "O Arjuna, this entire world and your body is Kshetra, and the consciousness within is Kshetrajna. Kshetrajna, idam shariram kaunteya, O Arjuna, this body is Kshetra, the field. Mind is also Kshetra. Etadyo veti, the one who is the witness of this body and mind inside you right now, is called Kshetrajna. Another name would be Sakshi, another name would be Atma. The conscious being within you is Kshetrajna. It is separate from body and mind. Now Arjuna has a question. If it is true that there is one Kshetrajya consciousness within, Atma within, fine. So many bodies are here. So how many Kshetrajyas? One here, one there, 200, 300, 6 billion Kshetrajyas in the world. Why only human beings? Trillions and trillions of creatures are there. So many Kshetrajyas? Or how many Kshetrajyas are there? How many Kshetrajyas are there? That is the question. And the second question would be, what about God? And which side is God? On the one side Kshetra, on the other side Kshetrajya. One side the world, body and mind. The other side, my own nature, Kshetrajya. Which side is God? Both of these questions, how many Kshetrajyas, how many Atma, and where is God? Both of these questions are answered by Krishna in the next verse, in the first line of the next verse, very dramatically. One line, dramatic answer to both questions. He says, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. O Arjuna, I, Krishna, I am God. I am the Kshetrajya in all these bodies. Which means, it's a tremendous statement. It means that there are not many Kshetrajyas. There is only one Kshetrajya, which shines through so many bodies, which works through so many bodies, which is the Atma for all of us. And that one Kshetrajya is God. In other words, yes, some of you are getting it. In other words, if this is who I am, and Krishna is saying, he is this, then I and Krishna are same. At the deepest spiritual level, we are one and the same. Now we understand when Shankaracharya sings, Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. He says, Mana buddhi ahankara chitta naham. I am not all this. Nacha shrotra jibbe, nacha grana netra. I am not the sensory system also. Nacha vyoma bhumi, na tejo na vayu. I am not the world and the body and all made of 5 elements. Then what I am, after distinguishing myself from all that, then only he can claim Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. There is a funny story about this, and it happened in Bangalore only about 40 years back. Not 40 years, 30 years back, in 1990s. There is great debate, Shastra, between Dvaita, Vedanta, Vishishta, Dvaita, Advaita. This explanation which I am giving is an Advaita explanation. Now, a great Dvaita scholar and a sadhu, he challenged the Advaita side that let us have a discussion between Advaita and Dvaita. And what is the topic of discussion? This line, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. You interpret in Advaita way, we will interpret in Dvaita way, and let us discuss it. Who is right and whose arguments are more cogent. And from Mumbai, a great Advaita scholar responded, a Swami. He has passed away recently. The interesting thing is, the Advaita group came with that Swami to Bangalore, and a hall was hired, and the Advaita Swami also came with his followers. 3 days discussion was supposed to take place, Shastra. But only on the first day itself, first half discussion, second half, the 2 scholars and sadhus, they are calm. But the followers on both sides, Advaita side and Dvaita side, they become so heated, they started throwing chairs at each other. So the discussion dissolved. And finally the Advaita Swami, he wrote a book, Advaita Vaijayanti Mala, he wrote. And there he said that I wrote so many letters to the organizing committee, who has won this? Please tell me. And no response has come, so I take it that I have won. And so I have written this book. So Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. God is our innermost reality. God is our innermost reality. This is to be understood. And when we focus on that, all spiritual practices, whether you worship God as separate from you in Dvaita Bhava, or you meditate on God as your innermost reality, or you do Jnana Vichara, or you serve this God in all beings, because Krishna says, I am the Kshetrajya in all beings. You can serve Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva. Whether you do all of that, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, or Raja Yoga, all that is Bhajan Ananda, the joy of spiritual practice. The joy of spiritual practice. And we can go one more step I will not describe that now. I'll just mention it and leave it there. There is something beyond this also. When we actually realize it, when the bhakta has the vision of God, when the yogi meditating in his heart on God becomes one with God, when the jnani gets that akhandakara vritti, realizing aham brahmasmi, the joy, the bliss which they experience far exceeds this bhajanananda also. The only name for that given is Brahmananda. The bliss of God realization. Now you see the categorization. Vishayananda, Bhajanananda,